And here we are on a Friday morning with the sun shining and the temperatures plummeting. Are they
Uh,
plummeting where you are, Pat?
I was just watching RT there about 15 minutes ago, Jude, and it said Donegal. They singled out Donegal for the coldest part of their Ireland today, and people in Donegal to be very careful on the roads. I
Hmm.
was thinking, there used to be an advert some years back where people in Donegal took exception about it. That it's cold up here. I think was the sort of catch line, but Jude, the reality is it's cold up here.
Yeah.
Last night was, I think, it reached somewhere around about -4, -5.
Thank God, that's low, all right.
Uh,
Usually I see in the weather forecast, and it sort of concurs with my boyhood memories. At Oma and Castlederg around there tend to get
yeah,
very low temperatures or snow or anything
yeah,
is going.
exactly. Very much so.
I think it's something to do with being inland. It
Yeah,
was the same thing in Canada actually, because Winnipeg was in the prairies. There was flat, a lot of flat
yeah,
land around it, and I think maybe that's the same with Oma. There are
yeah.
some mountains, but they're not too massive, you know.
Well, I presume the mountains disrupt the sort of weather patterns, but they
Yeah,
can, you know. But anyway, Jude, this morning, my dear missus just left there, and because she hung around here till that sort of ice sort of
yeah.
melt. The roads apparently are lethal this morning as well.
Well,
So,
well,
uh,
my missus would not go out in anymore if
uh,
the roads were slippy, and I think she's probably quite wise. They're not slippy, but I can see on the pavements, you know, that they're still frosty.
absolutely.
Anyway, enough of the meteorological chit
Yeah,
chat. Let's get to the meat of the matter here. There are so many stories begging for our wisdom and illumination, Pat, that it's hard
yeah,
to know where to start. So let's start royally. Let's start with Harry and Meghan
yeah.
and the degree to which they have been victimized. Would you say?
Uh, Jude, it's an, I don't know what's a term, Jude, when you study a sort of culture. Can't remember. As a friend of mine, he actually qualified, and it escapes me. But this exposes British culture, Jude. I haven't watched it, but I was reading a wee bit about it last night and again this morning. Harry and Meghan, it does seem to be that they have struck a chord in a way that has really, really upset the establishment in Britain. And if you read the establishment media, even some of the left wing ones like the Guardian, there's quite a lot of criticism of Harry and Meghan along the lines that they're whinging and all the rest of it, and that they're getting 100 million apparently from Netflix and so on. But Jude, let's get this clear. The whole thing basically has started when Harry married a woman of mixed race, and race is right in there, and there's no doubt about it. This wee girl Megan said from the outset, it was mentioned a couple of times about what if they had children, what color would they be? About the fact that she was of mixed race. There was all sorts of media speculation about her background and so on, so on. And let's get this. Remember the time Diana was going with Al Fayed? One of the claims made was the royal family were absolutely over the sort of over the top in regard to the fact that there was rumors at one stage she was pregnant, and the last thing they could deal with the fact is the future king would have a brother or a half brother who would be of half caste. So, Jude, it strikes me that, and if you read some of the people like Piers Morgan and all the rest, they wouldn't treat Diana or the Queen like this, but they're treating, this wee American half caste person, and that's their, I think that's what's going on underneath, in a
Well,
very different way.
I would say I watched, you know, before she became famous, I was watching Megan. And I
Yeah.
didn't know who she was then. I just saw her as an actor in Suits, which is a
Aye.
series. And if you haven't seen it, don't, is my advice, because it's rubbish. But um, I never thought, if you'd said to me after I'd watched that, which was the black woman in that?
Aye.
I definitely would have been baffled. I would have
Aye.
said,
Yeah,
"There's
somebody
no
had
black
asked you.
woman in that."
Aye.
I mean, she looks like a woman. I mean, if racism is at the center of this, by God, they really must have hypersensitive radar
Mm,
detectors for
mm.
racism or
Aye,
for
she's beautiful looking
color,
wee girl, yeah, yeah,
because she just looks like a dark skinned and long hair and the usual thing.
yeah.
Um, I see where the Sun has referred to her as Woko Ono.
Aye. Aye.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a slight gotcha. I have
Aye.
to admire the Sun. They do. You mightn't agree with
Aye.
what they're saying, but they do have a way of writing a headline which papers like the Irish Times could learn from. But I cannot take sides in this because I think both sides are in the wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, Meghan is sort of whinging about the tough time she's having, all that jewelry she had to wear. Uh, she's living in a house that is in Montecito, and I have been there, and it is I haven't seen her house, but I've been in Montecito, and it's one of the most beautiful little places I've ever seen. And she's living in a $14.65 million house. Her,
yeah.
as you say, her and Harry have got over 100 million for the 6-part series from Netflix. So what's with the whinging? I suppose they want to put the boot into the royal family. God knows there's plenty of room for doing that. And I'm sure every word you say, Pat, about them being racist is true. But at the same time, it jars on me where they're saying, oh, look, our lives were terribly hard. And,
Yeah.
I don't know how Meghan survived it and so on.
No,
I just,
Jude, I'm not saying they're like that. What I'm saying is the portrayal gets. That's what really gets me. I sit and watch it, and Megan is basically. Let's boil it down. She is sort of portrayed as some sort of like gold digger who inveigled her way into Harry's life and is now ruling him. And the royals are dutiful and they're doing everything right. And it's this American sort of thing, and the whole media coverage, particularly from the red tops and the sort of right wing media, it's a joy to watch it because they're basically saying this outsider is totally wrong. Our British royal family are so much classier and so much such, and the racism is nearly overt. You sort of go, that no wonder they're sort of in denial about the fact that there is racism. The old colonels and the whole establishment still
well,
see India and all these places as coolies and whatever, and
yeah.
they don't even realize their own racism.
Well, don't forget that the royal family have had previous bad experience with American women coming and taking their heirs to the throne,
Well, as
or
such,
the king, in
you
fact.
mean?
Yeah. So, that kind of thing that rankle and be in the race memory. And part of it is that she's American.
Yeah,
Apart from the black part, she's American, and they don't like
yeah,
Americans really all that much
yeah.
because they don't quite understand them. Pat, I just feel there's a danger when when people discuss this, that you get dragged into a situation where you're saying, which side are you on?
Mm.
I hereby announce that I am on nobody's side. If you like, the victims, so to speak, in heavy quotation marks, are Harry and Meghan, who
Yeah,
are living in a nearly $15 million
yeah.
house in a gorgeous place, are getting 100 million for this series. Come on, I'm not.
Well, no, it's all but impossible to feel when you see some people living out in the streets in Dublin and London, on a winter's night, and you see others struggling for heating and eating. It's
Yeah.
very hard to have somebody. But I'm still struggling. Jude, as you were chatting there, I was trying to remember that a friend of mine has a degree. When you study cultures, what the hell is that term for that? Um, but I'm sitting there watching.
What are you referring to now? That
I know that when there's a sort of when people study cultures,
yeah,
Jesus, Judith,
there's a way. There's a way of doing it. I've forgotten the name of it, but where
I see.
you
Yeah,
become an
that's what.
insider, you're in within the culture and
No,
look at the
no. There's a friend of mine he had a degree and he studied sort of various tribes and stuff like this. But
the
it's a
royal
word.
tribe. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. But I was just, I am not on anybody's side, and when it comes, like when you consider the fact that the royal family and Harry and these people, like I presume he's getting a hell of a lot of an allowance from his grandma's estate and from whatever.
Yeah.
But the final thing I'll say, one thing I have a certain amount of sympathy for Harry. Apparently, he has said in the past that the media were responsible for his mother's death, and they started again on his wife, and that's why
Mm.
he's taking it so serious. And
What
I
do you
can
think?
understand this on a human level. I can understand why he thinks that way.
Aye, that's right. He essentially, I heard him. I watched part of the
Uh,
first one that's out, and yeah, he more or less said that, or he implied that he didn't want history to repeat itself.
yeah,
There again, you see, the danger with being too much on Meghan and Harry's side is that you'll begin to think if the royal family was run properly, then it'd be a fine institution. You
Yeah.
know, there's no way you can have a good
Oh,
royal
Jude,
family, in
not
my
at
opinion.
all. No. Oh,
It's
I know
just
a
daft.
hereditary royal family. Jude, I was watching Question Time last night. Let's broaden this out a wee bit. And well, I don't know what sort of the self delusion that the Brits have when it comes to the royal family. They have this idea. They seem to think that a family is entitled to live in big castles, be treated that the laws don't apply to them, to be handed things for nothing, and they seem to, there's almost this say, you can spit on me as often as you like, and I love it. And you go, are you people for real? Dude, I don't get that. I really,
Is
genuinely,
it,
genuinely
maybe
don't
it's a
get that.
living soap opera thing. Maybe
I
it
don't
allows
give a
them to
movie.
talk about the way they
It's
talk about characters in soap opera. I really did. You see what so and so did last week?
Jude, it's got shades of the North Koreans and Kim Jong Il, and they laugh and sneer. Jude, they're doing it exactly the same. If they took a mirror and reflected it back on themselves,
Yeah.
I watched it last night. Jude, you should really watch the thing about Question Time last night about when they
Oh, I
discussed
will.
the royal family, and you sort of go, it really is. It's almost like the old when the Lord and Master goes past, people go on their knees,
Uh,
and you go,
uh, uh,
Jesus.
yeah. But even
I
aside from
that's
that, Pat, what about the picture of the loving couple that Harry and Meghan have projected? You know, all these photographs of themselves, and then they have these intimate moments where it's great. We've got away from everybody, ignoring the fact that there must be a photographer with a camera recording all of this. You know, it's I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, it's the British people's decision, and we really have to respect.
Jude, to leave it as you said, I think the only thing I have no interest whatever in the royal family, but I have. You're dead right. It's just like a soap opera.
Yeah, yeah.
It's some. There's something insane about it.
Well, a lot of soap operas are the most popular thing in TV. So
Yeah,
why wouldn't
Coronation
the
Street
royal
and
family?
EastEnders and the royal family. Three.
Okay, well, let's move sideways away from this and maybe look at Ireland's housing crisis, which Pierce Doherty was saying in the Dáil yesterday wasn't just a housing crisis. He says this housing crisis is becoming a social crisis. And he lists things like the public sector, the health service, the education sector, private companies recruiting and retaining staff in Dublin and our cities, and all over the place. So
Yeah,
he's saying essentially the society in the south of Ireland is sick.
yeah.
Is
Jude,
that
that
your
really is.
opinion?
Jude, we've been down this road before, but it is really. Let me give two or three examples. My dear wife fell off a bike one time about 2 or 3 years ago, and she broke her arm and shoulder and whatever. And we were up in the Letterkenny Hospital, and I got talking to a young doctor there, and he told me that if someone like 60 members of his class or his year started, I think it was UCD, he says about 40 of them or 49 of them had emigrated, and he was leaving. That guy was leaving, I think, the following Monday to go to Australia. Right. Piers Doherty in the Dáil, I think it was yesterday or the day before, said that Sinn Féin, he could produce any number of letters from people, from particularly nurses. 2/3 of the graduates of nursing school this year are emigrating. He says they're exhausted, they're anxious, they're stressed. Some of them are living in Dublin. And he said, then each month, they're having trouble finding their rent. It's extortionate, etc., etc. Dude, there was about 2 years ago, 18 months ago, a young Garda was found sleeping in his car
Ah,
outside the station because it's impossible. Right. The other thing, the final point, there was a woman on one of the, I can't remember now, one of the stations on the radio the other day. She's a principal of a school in Dublin. And she says it's got so desperate for staff that one Sunday evening she was ringing round her friends. Now, not the department, not the inspectors, not her friends. Did any of them know anybody who was available on Monday morning to come in to take a class? Now, don't ask me what the class was. But she was doing it off her own bat. She said what was happened during the summer was frequently they would have interviews for, say, a science teacher, and the people would maybe confirm on a Wednesday that they show up the following Monday morning for the interview. And she's come Monday morning, they didn't show up because they got a job somewhere down the country.
yeah.
They couldn't afford to come to Dublin. And she says it is no longer a housing thing. It's an educational thing. It's a health thing. It's a social problem now. And by the way, Leo Varadkar finally admitted it in the Dáil while talking to Pearson Doherty that it is a social problem now.
Yeah, he agreed. He agreed.
For
Amazing.
the
He
first time, by
agreed
the
with
way, for
every
the
word
first
that.
time.
But
Aye.
I tell you, one thing is missing,
Aye.
and both from Pierce Doherty and from Leo Varadkar, having listed all these problems, they didn't say how they plan to solve it. Maybe there is no solution.
Well, Jim, we apparently our rents have gone up in something like 12 years, gone up something like Jude, I'm making this up, about 800%. I think in Germany they've gone up about something like 18%.
Well, what's
You
the
know, and
solution, Pat? Is it to say you
Jude,
cannot?
sorry, Jude, well, I have a nephew who lives in Germany. He lives in a rent-controlled apartment block. The
Yeah.
rents only go up every 5 years, and by every 5 years they have a rent review, and I presume it's some sort of legislative thing, and it's controlled. And by the way, the apartment is cleaned up, and various things are done to it to ensure
Yeah.
it's kept to a standard. What happens when they build somewhere in Dublin? These cuckoo funds or vulture funds, buy them up and then sort of say, right, here's the rent, and it's 2,500 a month or whatever. And if
Okay.
you don't want
So
to pay it, and the only people now who can afford these are these executives and the
yeah.
big companies. But let's get another thing as well. Our economy has taken off like a rocket. We have had a lot of Polish and Eastern Europeans come in. The Ukraine war has come on, and there's a massive, and our own population is growing as well. So the demand is far greater than the supply. I think there was only 18,000 houses built last year, Jude, and we probably need about 3 times that.
So do we have an answer to it? I repeat again. Do we have an
Well,
answer?
you're asking the wrong. Owen
Well, you
O'Brien. I've
see,
heard Owen O'Brien. Actually, Jude, last night on prime time, I was just watching it for a while. There was a guy called Flynn on. He's a developer from down about Cork, and
yeah.
there was a housing estate was being built somewhere in Cork. And anyway, it was taken off the market before it even got there by a sort of a housing association. Now, for a very good for public housing, social housing. But there was a woman from she's been living in Ireland for 17 years. She was Polish, and she said her and her husband had been saving up for a couple of years to buy one of these houses, and then suddenly about 6 months before it was due to come on the market, they were taken off the market.
Yeah.
And she says the other houses they can't afford. These houses were a sort of middle range, middle price that she could afford.
Well, you see, I don't for a moment doubt all these horror stories that you're telling me, or Pierce Doherty would say, or other people.
Yeah.
But the question is, can they be sorted? I mean, I think the notion of paying exorbitant rents could be solved at a stroke, where the government passes a law says they can't go any higher than this, or some relationship with the cost of living. But that still doesn't solve the problem of 2/3 of nurses taking off, teachers who are fed up with the kind of conditions they have and going off. How are you going to solve all these various things? The education sector, health service, the housing sector. What's the answer to them? There's no good in lamenting them all the time. You must come up with answers of some kind. And nobody
Yeah,
seems to be doing it.
no, and that's the point. You see, there's almost two Irelands. I frequently have this. See, if you're living in Dublin, if your house and you're on a nice, well-paid job, you're low. That's great. Everything's going dandy for you. But say you're trying to get on the ladder, Jude. God help you.
Hmm.
I think this generation is coming behind us will never own their homes. Jude, go and tell me something. You're an intelligent man. If
You're starting the right way.
starting to yeah, but right. You're a young teacher, and they're looking for two and a half, say two. Just let's round it down, 2,000 a month for rent in Dublin. So you have to find, even if you shared, say, two or three, you have to find roughly maybe 700-800 every month of your salary, and you're on about 40,000. Now the tax take comes off that 40,000. You have to find 700-800 a minimum. Maybe if there's only two of you in the house, or even one of you, you might have to at least 1,000, maybe 2,000. Then you have to feed yourself. Maybe you have to pay for public transport, etc., etc. Why would you stay in Dublin or Cork or Limerick or Galway when you can
But they
come
wouldn't they
to
wouldn't
Roscommon
see
or
me.
Mayo?
They wouldn't
Uh, uh,
see me for the cloud of dust as I left.
yeah, yeah,
I'd be right out of there. Anybody in their right mind would be out of there,
yeah,
which of course will only lead to more problems.
yeah.
Uh, but where politicians are being elected into office, and it's their job to solve these things or at least address them. So there's no good in Pierce and Leo in the dolls saying, "Oh yes, this is very bad. And I agree, this is bad. And I agree, this is bad." You know, answers,
But see,
answers,
here's the
please.
thing. Pierce is saying if Sinn Féin, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. But
Yeah.
he says when Sinn Féin get into government, they're going to adopt a very different policy. That they're going to build more social housing. That the land banks that are currently owned by developers who are holding on to it, so to seeking to make a big profit, that increasing the value of the land and hold it for
Okay.
4 or 5 years and goes up and they make a killing.
Yeah.
He's saying it's going to be taken off them if you don't develop it within the next period. A lot of the houses that are derelict or lying vacant, they're going
Yeah.
to compulsory poachers and so on, I guess. So he says they're going to go be radical in their approach. Owen O'Brien has said this, so it'd be interesting to see
Well,
how much of this they can actually do.
yeah, well, that sounds good. I think in the housing crisis, they certainly are in a good spot. And I know Owen O'Brien has written this book a couple of years ago. But you're still left with a health service. You're still left with private companies trying to recruit people and retain people. It's not all down to housing. I think maybe housing's a very key aspect of it, but I don't think it's a whole story.
No, Jude, but look at the other thing. Maybe we're the victim of our own success. There's almost now 1 million people on the waiting lists for hospitals.
Mm,
Dude, it's
mm,
it's crazy.
mm,
I don't know whether we're incompetent or whether we've grown so much and so fast that the systems aren't in place, or
mm.
we just, I don't know. But everything seems to be creaking at the seams.
Yeah, I suppose the only comfort is that there's something similar, maybe not as intense, is happening throughout Europe and
Yeah.
maybe even the States as well. I'm not sure.
Well, Northern
Incidentally, they're
Ireland,
talking.
Northern Ireland isn't so good at the minute. Look at
No,
their
you can
housing
say that
lists and
again. It's
look at
bloody
the health
awful.
service. Yeah.
You can say safely that the health service, somebody said it, health service in the south is better than the health service in the north. That's some statement.
Yeah, that
Um,
is something.
okay, just as a side issue, Pat, they're talking about education of really doing a radical look at the education system, say in the secondary schools.
Yeah.
Uh, and they're sort of saying, we really got to open this up and look at it carefully. What should we be teaching? What 1 or 2 things would you advise them to look at and change? Radical, central.
Should I think, see, for boys particularly, I would teach domestic science for boys. Now, by the way, I'll tell you a very simple thing. A lot of guys go off and now live on their own or go off to different
Mm,
countries,
mm,
and they maybe get a flat or something,
mm,
and they can't cook properly and they can't
mm,
do anything.
mm,
Something simple. The other thing, Jude, see, even, and this is stupid, but it's basic maintenance of your house and your car. Learn how to change the oil. Learn
mm,
how to sort of fix a tap.
mm,
Jude,
mm,
I went to St. Eunice and we started off. We did Latin and we did French and we did Greek, even Greek for a wee while. We did algebra. Jude, I have never, I was about to say a rude word, I have never
mm.
used algebra in
That's
my life.
supposed to be good for your head, Pat. That's supposed to skills
I
in your
don't give
head.
a shit, Jude. I have never worked out where x plus y equals x c y or whatever.
Well, you see, Pat, what you're lamenting, and I agree with you actually. You're lamenting the fact that the education system hasn't served you well in terms
Yeah,
of what you're able to do or not do.
yeah,
I take it further than that. An awful lot of time and energy is spent, as you know, revising for exams and
yeah,
being taught in class and so on. And it all remains within the bounds of the school. At the end of the exams, a heap of scripts are marked by a whole range of teachers
yeah,
and the marks assigned. And then the scripts are dumped.
yeah,
So essentially, what it is there's an awful lot of work going on in schools that stays within schools. What happens in schools stays in schools.
yeah.
My point would be this: can they not devise a way to develop the same skills or the same sort of clear thinking by applying it to something in society? So that after the year of working intensively or cramming for exams or the equivalent, you've actually put something, the groups or the kids or the individuals have actually put something into society or helped society in some kind of way. I'll tell you a quick example, Pat.
That's what I was going to ask you. Give me an example of
Aye,
what you
a
do.
quick example. When I taught English, I used to get the kids to do interviews.
Yeah,
And I never, now that's not, a lot of teachers do that, but not so many do the way I did it. I say, go out and do a real interview. I give you the
yeah,
class off. You set up an appointment with somebody that you find interesting, and I want you to go and interview them. and then I'm going to
Yeah.
get you to write that up. So
Yeah.
they had to go out and find, the retired policeman or the butcher or the baker or the candlestick maker, and they had to do it, and they had to go and sit and be civil and say thank you,
Yeah.
and find a way of writing notes during it. And
Mhm.
they did it in pairs, incidentally. So
Yeah.
they had the combination of thinking.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a good idea because at least, if nothing else, it was having an impact. It was recognizing there was a world out there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
That
just
you did
despair.
after what you were saying. This is a real life experience.
And
Go out
you
there.
know
Yeah,
a deal with that made them sit up and fly right, because
yeah,
if it was doing an interview with somebody in the classroom pretending to be somebody, that
yeah.
was, like, they just caught it around sometimes, but they took it deadly seriously when they went to
Uh,
somebody. In fact, they were really shy and
Jude, when I was 15, a friend of my father, he owned a bar in Letterkenny, and he was stuck one night for a barman, somebody to take out bottles and stuff like that. And while it's strictly illegal, you're supposed to be over 18 to work in a bar. But I was big and tall and so on. He says, he told me, if a cop comes in, tell him you're 18. But anyway, so I went down there. Jude, I was to spend the next 3, 4 years working that bar. And I am telling you, Jude, I learned more in that bar. I never learned in St. Junans. I learned about human beings. I remember guys coming in as nice as could be, and then 3 or 4 drinks later, either sloppy all over the place, or nasty, or whatever, or they got sort of sad drunks or happy drunks. And I learned about human nature. And boys told me stories and all the rest. Dude, a lot of things academic and by the way, I'm not knocking academic. Latin was actually turned out to be quite useful. When I went to Spain, I could work out a lot of the Spanish
I mean,
words
if
from.
you'd spent the time learning Spanish in school rather than Latin.
Yeah, it would have been a lot better. But
Mm.
anyway, what I'm saying is, there should be a balance. This sort of thing, learning how many angels dancing on the head of a pin. Great idea for philosophical. There's
Uh.
not much use when you're sort of trying to work out the underground in London, how the train works.
That's right. But Ian, even apart from the individual person, I'm saying the individual person and the class, the groups, they're expending an awful lot of energy. So why not put that into something that's going to make lasting change or
Yeah.
make better something in society?
Uh,
Just this idea of sealing off the educational world from the real world sounds to me crazy. It just sounds
yeah,
nuts.
absolutely. I agree with you
Anyway, okay,
totally.
let's having solved that one. Let's look at this one. An ex-soldier, British soldier who shot dead a civilian during the Troubles, and you probably
Uh,
know the civilian's name, AIDAN McANESPIE, has been
uh,
convicted of manslaughter. He did this
uh,
in 1988, and
uh,
34 years later, he was found guilty of manslaughter. The parents who had fought for him for so many years have died, not
uh,
seeing his innocence established.
uh.
The groups of army veterans are very angry at
Ah,
this
God help him.
decision of manslaughter. And they say, thank God we've got this government amnesty bill coming in that'll stop people being punished, members of the armed forces. What's your thoughts on that whole thing?
Dude, someone. There's a narrative coming out of the unionist British side that's disgusting. They're saying that this is a witch hunt of former soldiers, etc., etc., etc. Right, Jude? There was a conflict. The British Army, the RUC, the Loyalists were all involved in it. Right, that there was two sides. You check it out. A friend of mine worked out that possibly 10,000 Republicans, nationalists went through the courts, served time, and during the 30 years of conflict. You could count on your hands how many members of the security forces, British, RUC, whatever, went to the courts. Most of them served, even for killings, most of them served less than 2 years. And most of them, I think just about it, were reinstated back into their regiments and so on. Aidan McANESPIE, the most ridiculous thing, this guy claimed that Aidan McANESPIE and his fingers slipped on a machine gun.
Because it
Slipped.
was because it was
I,
wet.
but even one of the experts said your finger on a machine gun, you need to press a machine gun. Apparently, there's pressure and all the rest. So it was ridiculous. So his family, his mother and father are dead. He was killed 34 years ago, and you wait 34 years to get justice. A ridiculous. The guy was shot dead. I presume deliberately.
Well, I don't know about that. I have to state the fact. The fact is that the bullet that killed him ricocheted off the road.
Aye, but what
Hit him
somebody
over.
fired a shot, whether he meant to kill him or not. I'm not saying he did or didn't, but hey, Jude, when you fire a gun,
Oh,
you
I
know,
have.
yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
And under no circumstances, clearly, well, I would have thought anyway, except that was routine for them,
yeah.
should the safety catch be off and a gun that you've got
Yeah,
pointed in
dude,
somebody's
if you
direction?
turn around and say my finger slip, dude, like, well, the man meant to kill him or not. I'm not implying that. But when you fire a gun, and he must have, I know, like to say your finger slipped, that like, and the court obviously doesn't accept that either.
But these veterans groups certainly accepted it and are angry at this decision. Well, I tell you the truth, Pat. I sometimes despair. I just sometimes despair of how Ireland and England, essentially England, can ever get along when you have this kind of thing going on. That these
Mm,
guys don't see that being in somebody else's country and shooting guys that are innocent, at least
yeah,
innocent in terms of they haven't been tried,
yeah,
that they then see themselves as being the victim and that
yeah.
there's veterans groups
Yeah,
objecting and
there's a
angry.
guy. Aye, there's a guy dead. A young fella going through a checkpoint. He's dead. A soldier fired a shot, and so on. And they think the soldier, he's the victim here.
Aye, that's right. And the other thing is this, we expect so little. We ask for so little.
Yeah,
After this verdict was handed down of manslaughter and that the guy was guilty of manslaughter, the family of Aidan McANESPIE wept for joy.
yeah,
For God's sake, is the world gone crazy? You know,
yeah,
this is they're weeping for joy over the scrap
yeah.
34 years later. And you and I know that that guy will not serve a day in prison.
Not
He
at,
will not
but
go to
I
prison.
can understand. It's not that. It's sort of a recognition that they, that their brother was unlawfully killed. That's what manslaughter
Oh,
basically
yeah,
means.
yes, yes, yes. I
And,
think
but it's acceptance, too, Jude, that that at least there's they're not thanking the British for their justice. I think that's at relief. See this rubbish that's been, that it's relief more than sort of joy. I think.
Oh yeah, but isn't it terrible that that's all you can sort of look for? That you have the satisfaction of knowing that the man's name was cleared.
Yeah,
Uh, Yet he's dead,
yeah,
and the guy who killed him isn't going to suffer, isn't
not
going
at
to be
all,
punished.
not at
And
all.
it took him 34 years to get to this point.
Uh, uh,
I'm surprised people don't go mad with rage.
uh,
I really
uh,
am. And that's not an isolated case. You know yourself,
not at all.
Bloody Sunday and all the rest of them.
By the way, Jude, there was just last Saturday there was one of these apprentice boys marches in Derry, and there's a guy walking around Derry with I support Soldier F, no apologies, no surrender on a T-shirt. Soldier F was,
Well, we'll come back to t-shirts at the end. Come back to
yes,
t-shirts at the end. Let's move over to football briefly because oh Jesus, we're really far down in time.
yeah,
The FAI has been fined €20,000
yeah.
because those girls sang "ooh ah up there ah." What's your thoughts, Pat? Quickly.
Yeah, Jude, I'm sort of a mixed feeling. I don't want him. The victims of the IRA, the families, and all that, I'm very sorry for them. But Jude, I have a real thing about, like, would the French singing some sort of song for the French resistance or someone, would they accept a fine for some French girl singing about that?
Well, you see, now the French resistance is universally acknowledged by the victors as being
Yeah, I
people.
know, and all that sort of stuff. Dude, as somebody pointed out one day, these wee girls were singing it as much as like living next door to Alice. It was just a song, and Jude, I do
Yeah,
accept that.
that's right.
These wee girls are long gone. A lot of them, I'm certain, have no perspective on the troubles in the past. They were just playing football. So this sort of, slap on the wrist. Thank you for slapping us on the wrist. The FAA, here's 20,000. Yes, and we were in the wrong. I would just wish the FAA had sort of said, wait a minute, we're not just accepting this willy nilly type thing.
Well,
It's typical Irish, and I think,
I tend to agree with you at times, Pat, I must say. On the other hand, they probably figured if he didn't, it would be worse. There'd be a big controversy about
that's
it.
probably
And they
true.
get dragged through the mire and, also, are
Yeah.
you supporting murder and all the rest of it?
That sort of
So,
stuff. Accept that.
easiest thing to do is let it go. There was another couple of topics I really wanted to talk about, but I can't because I've got to show the viewer my Christmas jumper.
It's beginning to look a lot like a United Ireland.
You thought it was going to say ooh ah up the rod, didn't you? Okay, Pat.
All the
See
best,
ya.
Jude.
All the
Bye
best.
bye. Good
Bye.
luck.